Schauen wir noch mal, funktioniert's überall gut?
Okay, so everyone can hear me?
Und ihr seid jetzt
Where are you
von
from?
woher noch mal? Aus Dettingen.
From
genau.
Dettingen.
Kabel
That's
noch?
great.
Ihr seid ja...
And how large is your group?
50, right? No, 46.
Ja, macht ja nichts.
Yes, 46.
Das ist der normale...
That's a
der
good
normale
size.
Bund, den es gibt. Gehen wir
So,
nicht
over to the right here, please.
Das ist schon gut.
Everyone,
Gut,
please, over to the right.
Some places have a special aura. And Assisi is one of them. It radiates the charm of one of Christianity's most beloved saints. We're in Italy's Umbria region, north of Rome. It's Friday morning and the weekend is beckoning. The main square of Assisi is undergoing a transformation. For 2 days, the town will return to the Middle Ages and celebrate its origins, the festival of Calendi Maggio. Brother Thomas is a German Franciscan. He lives in Assisi and loves to show his fellow Germans the town.
The town is not a museum. People live here. It's their home. That'll be especially noticeable during the next couple of days, when Assisi celebrates the medieval festival of Calendi Maggio. That's something the townsfolk stage for themselves and their friends. It's not publicized very much. It's a festival for the town and its residents, and it's part of the town's identity.
Assisi was a bustling medieval town when Francis was born here in 1182. But nobody could have guessed that he would make Assisi world famous and that his life would be an inspiration for millions of people down through the centuries. His father was a wealthy merchant, and Francis grew up in luxury. At first, he set his sights on a military career, but then changed his mind. He had a dream in which God called him to renounce all his worldly possessions and live a life of penance. This young man's extraordinary charisma attracted others, and soon a community developed around him that eventually gave rise to the Franciscan order. When St. Francis died in 1226, he was buried here on the hillside. But such was the prestige of the new Franciscan order that soon a magnificent church was built to house his remains. It was a strange paradox for the man who loved poverty and simplicity.
Man könnte sich zu Beginn die Frage stellen,
We could start by asking what kind of a person Francis of Assisi was. Just 2 years after his death, his followers began building a church to house his tomb. That was extraordinary and shows us what an impact his life had on people. Right from the start, Francis drew people to Assisi. Thousands wanted to join his community, to visit his tomb, to be near him. This church bears witness to that influence, to the impact his life had on people.
So muss man es eigentlich verstehen.
The tomb itself is in a crypt below the church. Touching in its simplicity, like St. Francis himself. Members of the Franciscan order can be found here at every hour of the day, praying at the grave of the man who inspired and continues to inspire the Franciscan way of life. The basilica comprises an upper church and a lower one. Begun as a Romanesque structure, it was later worked on by several great architects of the Baroque period. The magnificent 14th century frescoes in the upper church are the earliest depiction of the saint's life. Giotto began painting them just 6 years after Francis was proclaimed a saint in 1228.
It's the story of a journey, Francis's journey of faith. When he set out, he didn't know exactly where he was heading. He thought he'd like to become a knight, but he wasn't sure. And then he had an encounter with God on the building site of a church. Christ was alive and present there, and Francis encountered him personally. For me, there's an encouraging lesson in this. We shouldn't stop asking questions about our life, about what we believe. It's worth continuing the journey, even if the path itself is not always clear. Francis didn't see everything clearly from the start. He needed time. He had to search and ask questions. He had to find his path in life. And then, as time passed, it became clearer.
Francis's choice of a simple lifestyle is in stark contrast to our hectic world. But the Basilica doesn't browbeat us with morals. Brother Thomas points out its psychological subtleties.
Even in the Baroque church, there was a likeness, for instance, here at the front where the altar is placed. We celebrate the Eucharistic banquet here, a foretaste of eternal life. And above the altar, we see the wedding at Cana, which also represents it. It's a symbol of eternal life, and logically we have to ask, why is it more difficult to win people for the faith today? If eternal life is like a banquet at which the wine never runs out, I'd like to see the person who doesn't want to be invited. That's pretty obvious.
5 million tourists from all over the world come to Assisi each year. Apart from the famous basilica, they want to see the town, not least because of its charming traditions and festivals, especially Calendimaggio. Everything's ready. Let the festivities begin. Residents from the two sections of Assisi dress up to compete in historical costumes, the upper town against the lower town. The winners are those who put on the best show. The contest has its origins in an historical dispute, a rivalry that split the town in the late Middle Ages. On day one, the flags of Assisi, united in harmony, are blessed in St. Francis Basilica, combining the religious and secular aspects of the festival. This annual ritual is actually quite new. It was introduced in 1954. The historical costumes are very elaborate and richly decorated. It's all a bit reminiscent of Italian opera. After the ceremony, the basilica falls silent. When people wanted to share his life, Francis is said to have quoted a passage of St. Matthew's Gospel to them. "If you wish to be perfect, go and sell your possessions and give to the poor, and come, follow me." The call to evangelical poverty in the footsteps of Christ. This is the path that Brother Thomas has also chosen.
Assisi ist für mich ein wichtiger, ein wertvoller Ort.
Assisi is very important to me.
Weil eine Botschaft vermittelt.
It's precious because it proclaims a message that is part of my life, a part I like to communicate. It's my personal experience. With regard to faith, it's one's relationship to the Church. It's important that everyone has their own experience. I hope, of course, a positive one. And I think Assisi is a place where lots of people can experience what the Church is and what life according to the Gospel means, what being a Christian means.
The Franciscan Mother House, the Order's headquarters, is situated within the walls of the Basilica. Today, the Order has some 30,000 members. After the Jesuits and Benedictines, it's the third largest order in the Roman Catholic Church. Brother Thomas shows us how the friars live in Assisi. 12 square meters with a balcony. It's a bit like a student's dorm. Books are among the few possessions a Franciscan is allowed to call his own.
So ähnlich schaut's eigentlich bei jedem von uns aus.
All the rooms are very similar.
Und jeder hat so sein Zimmer und sein
Each brother has his own room and the things he needs to work. And that's all. We also have a fairly large library here, where all the books are kept that don't fit into our rooms. And today the computer is our main tool. All our correspondence, reservations for guided tours, and all the planning is done on the computer.
Rise early, pray, and then guide a group of pilgrims. That's the life of the Franciscans here. Unless, of course, a very special guest is announced. As on October the 4th, 2013, when the crowds gathered on the square in front of the Basilica on St. Francis's feast day. And the special guest was none other than Jorge Maria Bergoglio, Pope Francis himself. The pontiff from Argentina is the first ever to have chosen the name of Il Poverello, the little poor man from Assisi. And he came to pray at his namesake's tomb. With a life of poverty and simplicity, St. Francis tried to fulfill his mission to rebuild the Church. And the Pope from the end of the world is also trying to rejuvenate the institution. He came to Assisi as a pastor and a priest. The Basilica was hushed as Francis celebrated Mass.
Nome del Padre, del Figlio e dello Spirito Santo. Amen. La pace sia con voi.
Fortificò la città nell'assedio.
Der Papst hat alle.
He greeted all the Franciscan brothers personally. He always does that when he visits a monastery. His schedule was very demanding. He visited all the important sites in one day, and he was pretty tired in the evening. He got very close to the people.
What was Brother Thomas's impression of the visit?
Well, on the one hand, it was very special, but on the other, it was perfectly ordinary. Because this Pope is so unflamboyant in his manner. When he celebrates Mass, he's very quiet and thoughtful. He doesn't use the liturgy to make theatrical gestures. But when he mixes with the people, he's very lively. He stopped his car in Assisi, for instance, to have coffee with some people at a coffee bar. Apparently, they had hung up a banner inviting him, so he stopped the car. Of course, it was a nightmare for the security people when the woman came out of the bar with a cup of coffee for him. The Pope's not supposed to drink anything given to him by an unknown person. But he does that kind of thing, and people are delighted when they meet him personally.
Today, the Franciscans are all over town. And they seem to be enjoying themselves. Wild boar in every conceivable form, truffles and cheese. The Umbrian cuisine is delicious. Assisi is especially famous for its confectionery. Dozens of shops sell desserts that make your mouth water. Brother Thomas relaxes his Franciscan modesty and has a field day. Together with his friend Claudio, who is the king of sweet temptations.
A typical sweet treat here is rocciata, rather like strudel but heavier. It's made with chocolate and dried fruit, as well as apple and fresh walnuts. It's rolled in pastry, just like a strudel. And usually it's washed down with a glass of liqueur, one that's especially made to accompany our desserts.
Church bells are often the only sound you hear in the upper town. Assisi is hilly, and the maze of twisting lanes in the old town dissolves into fields at the foot of Monte Subasio. It's a lovely view, which Brother Thomas takes time to enjoy when he's not guiding groups of pilgrims. Inevitably, it reminds him of St. Francis.
He had the most important experiences of his life in this area. Down there, he met lepers. He prayed in the various chapels. And that's where he experienced those decisive moments outside the town. And this is an interesting point. Outside official church structures. There were lots of churches in Assisi and many opportunities for pastoral work. But he wasn't drawn to them at this point of time. He was looking for something different, which he found among the lepers and in the spiritual experience of prayer. The things I experience in life are related to my faith. They can't be separated from each other.
The Franciscans pray twice a day in the lower church of the Basilica, at 6:30 in the morning and at 7 in the evening. Whereas the followers of St. Benedict, for instance, run farms and vineyards, combining manual work and prayer, Franciscans have always been wandering preachers and pastors. When they settle somewhere, it's usually in towns and cities where the spiritual need is greatest. On the second day of Assisi's annual festival, a piper heralds the start of the colourful show. The actual contest begins today, and the medieval festival of Calendimaggio reaches its height. But first, a meal with the Franciscans. And a second private tour with Brother Thomas. Through his monastery. It used to be something quite different.
People often wonder why this is such a large building. Actually, it's a papal palace, a palace for the Pope. You see this gate? It's especially large so that the Pope could drive through it in his coach. The dimensions of this building are all related to the fact that it was built to be a papal residence. For centuries, the popes stayed here.
Today it houses Franciscan friars and also students. The Theological Institute here is affiliated to the Pontifical Lateran University, which trains seminarians for the Diocese of Rome. It's also a centre of Franciscan studies and of modern Franciscan life.
The rule of our order includes some things which seem a bit strange today. For instance, St. Francis completely forbade the use of money. He viewed money as something alien to the real world. In that period, money was a privilege of the rich, and Francis wanted to live like the simple people. And that's why he forbade money. He also forbade us riding horses. It's part of the rule. Amusing things that we have to laugh about because hardly any of us can ride. So it wouldn't be hard to fulfill that part of the rule. What Francis, of course, meant was that the horse was the symbol of the rich and powerful. Prosperous folk had horses, others didn't.
The refectory, the friar's dining room, is a hive of activity. It's almost dinner time. Wine is part of the meal, a symbol of the resurrection because dead grapes are brought to new life through fermentation. Men from 20 countries live together here. Most of them are Italian, but there are also a lot of Romanians and Poles. For a Franciscan friary, this refectory is rather grand. That's because of its papal history. Not all popes have lived as modestly as the current one. In fact, until recently, the lifestyle of the popes rivaled that of the crowned heads of Europe.
These paintings are of the popes who had something to do with St. Francis, were members of our order, or had a special connection to the Franciscans or to Assisi. They're not presented chronologically, but according to popularity and special interest.
Beneath the large painting of the Last Supper hangs the small portrait of a man who is popular and of special interest today, Pope Francis. Did he eat in this room when he came to Assisi? Or perhaps even hide a little secret under the table?
The brothers keep special things there. It's more difficult for us because there are no drawers under these tables. It used to be an important tradition in our monasteries. The old tables had a drawer underneath, where the brothers could keep their false teeth, or pills, or other things. It was like that in our monastery in Upper Bavaria, where I lived in the early 90s. There were some old brothers in the community, and once, when I put the soup tureen on the table, one of them opened a drawer and took out a sausage that he had been storing there for several days. He threw it into the soup triumphantly and said, "Look what I've got."
In the afternoon, the lovely town becomes even lovelier. The pretty residents become even prettier. Who will win the trophy this year? The upper town or the lower town? To the visitor, this may look like a spontaneous show, but it has all been perfectly organized and rehearsed. The excitement grows and the tension mounts. Some of the contestants have been waiting all year for this moment. While the upper town flaunts extravagant costumes, residents of the lower town score points with their humour. The jury is won over by the funny depictions of medieval life. The Calendimaggio culminates in a frenzy of dance, which everyone enjoys. And when the festival is over, Assisi becomes once again what it has been for centuries, the town we associate with Il Poverello, the little poor man, St. Francis.